Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 203. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and in Virginia, we have a very, very special guest, Mark Lattanzi. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. As well, I was injured over the weekend, but I'm dealing with it.
Well, you know what? This podcast, as I was explaining to you before we hit record, is all about doing hard things, navigating hard things. And I mean, what better timing to record this episode after having gone through a relatively hard thing? And I think it'll be clear as we talk why an injury or why a fall is such a big deal for someone like you because of the way that you spend your time and the things you pursue. But before I get into it, I just want to give a little context for how we got here. My good friend, Frank Alois, who is episode 174 of this podcast, had mentioned your name a handful of times and pushed me to reach out to you. And when I looked into your story and what you've done, I thought, wow, how has it taken me this long? One, but two, I really need to talk to Mark because I have so many big questions for him. And with that being said, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the people listening.
Sure. Mark Lattanzi. I just turned 60 2 weeks ago. I'll just point out I didn't break any bones until I turned 60. I'm for the last 25 years an adventure racer, and I do a fair bit of running. That has been my love throughout my life. I ran in high school. I ran not for the university, but I ran all through college and got into marathons. But really adventure racing is where I've settled. And that's sort of been my career, if you wanted to call it that. And the obvious question is, what is adventure racing? Because it's not a very well-known sport, which is unfortunate because it's an incredible sport. But in a nutshell, it's like triathlon in that there is running, biking, and in our case, paddling some kind of vessel, as well as some other activities, except there's no set course. There's just checkpoints in the woods, and you have to find them using only a map and a compass. And the races can be anywhere from 6 hours to 10 days long, and that's nonstop. So there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of gear. So it tends to be a slightly older crowd that has a little bit more flexibility in their life. But but it's a great sport. I encourage anybody that hasn't tried it to look it up.
So I would imagine there are a lot of different ways that adventure racing could look. And one of the things I know you've done for sure, because of the connection to Frank's wife, Sarah, is the Marathon des Sables. And so why don't we just start there as an example? Can you tell people, one, what is the Marathon des Sables? And two, why would you pursue something like that?
Right. Well, it's kind of fun to try and run across a desert in some people's version of fun. But the Marathon des Sables is a 6-7 day race that is in Morocco in the desert. It's been going on for 35 years. Amazing production. It's put on by a French race director. It's a stage race. So every day you get up and you put on all your kit and you run somewhere between 20 and 40 miles. And then they set up tents for you. and you sleep in those tents that night and get up the next day and do it again. The interesting thing about it is that on day one, you have to carry all of your kit, including food. The only thing they give you is water, and they give you 9 liters a day. So day one, you have a relatively heavy backpack, anywhere from 15 to 25 pounds. And then as the week goes on, obviously it gets lighter. So, but it is a very logistical problem to figure out what to carry and what not to carry.
So you hit on something that I want to talk with you about, which is problems and problems as it pertains to adventure. Because I was thinking in preparation for this conversation, what makes adventure racing fun for anyone, but in this case for you. And I kept coming back to the idea that there are problems that need to be solved in creative ways, in challenging ways. And I'm curious if that's what is fun in part about adventure racing, is that it's full of problems.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Joe. It's there's a lot of challenges and you don't necessarily know what they are, right? Heading into it. And so they keep the course a secret. Sometimes they reveal the distances, and so you have an idea, but there's always some problem in the middle, like you're going along paddling and then there's a dam and you have to take the boats out of the water and figure out how to get the boats below the dam to keep going, or you're biking and then the trail disappears and so you're carrying your bike. So there's a multitude of things like that. Sometimes you'll show up to a checkpoint and it'll be in a cave, or there's just anything that a race director could dream up. And that is I say that to be good at adventure racing, it's the mental aspect that you really need to conquer, and that's probably true in most endurance sports. But in adventure racing, if you can be a good navigator, you could walk or not go fast through the entire race and still do very well, right? Because going in the right direction is worth a lot. So yeah.
So one of the things that I'm excited for throughout our conversation is to weave in some concepts, lessons, takeaways that are applicable to life at large, not just adventure racing. And I think there are a lot that you already mentioned. And so part of me wants to know what squiggly lines means to you. I know what that means, but what does it mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned. I was in another interview recently, and they asked me what I thought my legacy to the sport would be, and it's hard not to bring that up. So, in 2017, I published a book on map and compass navigation, and the title of it is Squiggly Lines, um, which is a play on, of course, topographic lines on a map that look like a bunch of squiggles until you understand them.
Mm.
So that book was 3 or 4 years in the making and has done quite well in our little community. But it's basically a how-to on navigating with just a map and a compass.
Mm.
So it's full of exercises and problems, So it's almost a workbook more than a text.
Mm. Well, in a lot of ways, I think that adventure racing is sounding a lot like life. There are these checkpoints we're trying to get to. There are these directions that we may or may not have. And there are conditions that we don't know, up ahead, and we have to navigate that. And so I'm just wondering, in what ways has adventure racing and learning to navigate the squiggly lines in that world translated to your ability to navigate the squiggly lines in life?
Yeah, I think the big lesson is you're not in control, and learning how to deal with that, and it's not good or bad, it's just what it is, and you can argue with the reality of life,
Mm.
but you can't change it, and so it's one of my favorite quotes is by I forget the lady's name, um, but it's you can argue with reality, but you'll be wrong 100% of the time. And it's a nice, way to think about problems. And I could give you a great example in a race. We showed up at a transition from running to paddling, and we were very late, but we were within the time cutoff. But they had somehow decided there were no more teams coming. And so they had taken the remaining boats away. So we got there and there's no boats for us. And one of my teammates just immediately started saying, well, we have to call the race director. We need to, this isn't fair. And I'm like, look, we can do all that, but it's not going to change the reality that we're standing here and there's no boats. So let's just solve this problem. And so we worked with, this was in Spain, which makes the problem a little harder. Um, but we found two people that had boats that were happened to be at that put in that were willing to give them to the race, with the caveat that the race would get them back. And so we took two radically different two-person kayaks down this river, and it was okay. They were a little slower than the ones we would have had, but we solved the problem, and then you just keep going, just like in life.
I love that. Let's just solve this problem. Because I think it's easy to get carried away with all the what ifs or all the possibilities, options for the future. But just to be in this moment and say, let's just solve this problem. I'm sure that comes from a lot of experience of you maybe having to remind yourself of that. I mean, over the years, I'm sure there were some disasters sprinkled into your adventure racing experiences. What were some of the moments that maybe couldn't be solved? Do those exist?
Yeah, kind of semi famous. There's a very hard race called the Patagonia Expedition Race. It happens down in Punta Arenas, Chile, in the south, the very southern end of South America. It's an amazing race, 10 days long, and known to be very hard. Like the winning teams don't break a mile an hour. The terrain is so difficult on foot. I mean, and there's most of the paddles get adjusted because the winds can get up to 100 miles an hour, and you could be biking. We were literally biking down there and the wind picked up and we could not pedal forwards. When we got off our bikes, there's a video because there happened to be a cameraman right there. The wind lifted the gravel off the road and the four of us dropped our bikes and ran for shelter, pelted by gravel. So it's a challenging event. But in our first attempt, we were on a ridge line and got a storm came in. So we had to leave the ridge. And so we dropped down off the wrong side, and one thing led to another. And so this was a 3-day trek. It was a 3-day trek that turned into a 4-day trek and then a 5-day trek. We ran out of food. We ran out of fresh water. One of my teammates broke his ankle. One was hypothermic. We were in dire straits. Very dire straits. We're literally saying goodbye to each other as we pitch our tent and sleep it's like we have a big problem. We had a satellite phone that didn't work and then the battery died. We had a flare gun. We fired it when we saw something going by, and I learned about flare guns. Anyway, we eventually got our spot tracker to fire off an SOS that relayed to the United States Rescue, that relayed back to the race director, and they sent a helicopter on day 11 of the 10-day race and picked us up in the wilderness where we were sort of pitched and crawling because we were so beaten up that we couldn't make very good progress. So yeah,
Wow.
so that was a very unexpected event that Outside Magazine did a story on it, and it said "When Smart People Do Dumb Things" was the title of it.
That's great. Oh man. So all right. So let me get into the questions that I ask every guest. And we'll start with the first big one, which is when you look back at your life to this point, there are a lot of hard things you've done on purpose, but what's the hardest thing that you've done or that you've had to handle, I should say, that you did not choose for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joe. I'm there's death of a loved one or a family member, and all of those are very hard to handle, especially a child. I don't have children, so that one's not going to happen.
Mm.
But for me, the hardest event that I had to go through was divorce.
Mm.
Um, yeah, my first wife and I were not, it wasn't um, contested. We just had a kind of a disagreement about where we wanted life to go. And so, although we still cared for each other, we separated. And that shook my self confidence in a way that I was not expecting because you sort of, till death do you part. And then when that's not the case, you have this I can't trust myself really to make decisions because clearly I made this decision and I was wrong. And, I was 28 at the time, so obviously younger. And yeah, but it really shook my self confidence about life moving ahead, relationships and everything. And it took me years to get over that.
Well, one, I appreciate you sharing that. And two, I don't think out of 203 episodes, anyone has given that answer. Which I know, right? People who have been on the podcast have gone through that, but nobody's given that as their answer. And it's interesting because I work with a number of clients, and a handful of them are at various stages of the divorce process. And it's hard, right? And I see that, I hear that, I talk to them about it, but I've never really thought about the confidence part, the confidence being shaken of you made this commitment that at the time you were so sure of, only later on to realize or recognize, hey, maybe this wasn't what I thought it was, or how do I trust myself? How did you get through that?
Um, I don't know. A lot of living and just, learning and growing, I guess, realizing that, some things aren't in your control and you just have to accept that you're not all knowing, all powerful, that you're going to make mistakes and you just have to internalize that, you're fallible. And so, of course, when you're 20, you're not. You're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? You're and so, yeah, I think um, it's a I don't know. That was just it was hard for me, and I think maybe the answer is not common because a lot of divorces are the result of infidelity or actions that it's very easy to not blame yourself.
Mhm, mhm.
But when it's not that, when it's something else, then it's this internal thing you've got to really think about to work through.
Can I ask you a hard question?
Sure.
If you could go back to when you decided to get married, would you do it again?
Absolutely. Without, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Could you explain?
Well, I feel like I at least make the best decision I can make at the time. So, if you put me back there, maybe with what I know now, I would not get married so young. We were married at 23. Um, but at that time, I felt like it was the right thing. And I think, you can also, one of the things that helped me was I don't think of it as a failure. I think of it as 5 years of a successful relationship that then ended and we went different directions.
Hmm.
Right. And so that framing is sort of key. And I grew and learned a lot in my first marriage. So, yeah.
I love that answer. And I guess to bring it back a bit to adventure racing, to endurance sport in general, you mentioned for that endeavor down in Patagonia, you said very specifically on our first attempt. And so I'm wondering when smart people do dumb things, round two, does that mean you went back and learned from the mistakes?
4 times.
Oh,
Yes. It's not a race that many teams finish. It's co-ed teams of four. And the finish rate is usually, you know, 3 or 4 of those teams, maybe. And so it took us 4 tries to actually get to the finish line. Um, and and yeah, that was yeah. And I would go back and do it again. Um, yeah, actually, I take that back. We finished on the third attempt, and then I went back and and my one of my teammates broke her hip in the last bike ride, and so we did not make it that year either.
Mm.
So,
You know what I think is really interesting about that is a lot of people with the time, the effort, the energy that goes into a pursuit like that, after maybe the second failure, they might say, okay, I tried, but this is a lot. And so I don't know, I might hang this one up. What is it inside of you that just itches to do these things?
yeah. So again, right, it's your definition of success. You know, I go down to Patagonia. I spend 2+ weeks with 3 other teammates that are also good friends, and we have a really good time. And so, is that a successful trip? Well, yeah. Did we make it to the finish line of the race? Well, no. But right, so it's if it's what you do for fun, then yeah,
One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "Those who dance are considered insane by those who can't hear the music." And
right.
right, you guys are just dancing to music that most people are not listening to. So, with that being said, I'd love to transition. I think there's a lot here. So I'm curious what you're going to pick. When you look back at your entire life, the 60 years, what's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose? And why did you do that thing?
Oh, wow. I hate to say this, but I guess I'm gonna.
Okay.
Let me pause here and reflect because there were a lot of hard, it was hard and relatively short. Okay, I'm going here.
Sure.
The Barkley Marathon.
I am so
I
glad we're talking about this. Yeah.
so that was I knew it was going to be hard. I trained. I needed to get into it 10 years before I did. Um, so it was only 3 years ago that I attempted it. And I had one of the worst races of my life. Um, I do. I did a similar event in New Zealand the next year, and I thought it was equally hard. But the Barkley, especially this past one, because they moved it into February, the weather. But it really is insanity. It's not about finishing that race. It's about learning your limit.
Mhm.
And all the videos will tell you that, right? Yeah, just for me, the vertical was hard, but my area that I live in is steep rhododendron covered slopes. So I was okay with that. But I'm not an ultra runner, so the actual distance got to me before the vertical. Although it was a combination of a lot of things. Yeah, but I fell apart in that race, and yeah,
So we should talk about this. And I'm glad we're talking about it because I've been fixated on this race ever since I first came across it. I want to say maybe 5, 6, or 7, 8 years ago. I saw a clip on YouTube, and it was this guy who I now know is Gary Cantrell, also known as Lazarus
left.
Lake,
Yep.
right? Just big beard, smoking a cigarette. I think he had an air horn or something in his hand. And it was the title of the YouTube video was something along the lines of the world's toughest race or toughest ultra marathon, whatever. So I clicked on it, and you see this guy, it is insanity from watching and reading about it, etc. And you can tell me more about this, but from the fact that, like, I believe you get like a letter in the mail that says, we give our condolences. You've been accepted to
Condolences.
this
It's the
race, right?
condolences email. Yes.
Yeah. And like, there's a lot that's mysterious about it, and it's just so hard. So tell us first, what is the race for people listening who don't know? And then I'd love to hear more about your experience.
It's a race in eastern Tennessee at a state park called Frozen Head State Park. And there's many videos about it that talk about the history and how it evolved. It's a very rugged area, very steep slopes, very wet. The weather changes on a dime. Uh, they call it 100 milers, but it's more like 130. Each loop it's 5 loops, where you have to find 13 to 15 books that are hidden. And so, and you're not really doing map and compass navigation, although you are, but you're also following this 7-page run-on sentence written by Laz that you're supposed to follow as close as you can. So if it says, go up the third ridge to the funny looking tree and then take a left and go that way, that's what you're supposed to do, which is not really orienteering, right? And they don't call it an orienteering race. So, um, but what you do in a nutshell is you are at this campground and you go clockwise or counterclockwise around this loop 5 times. So each loop is 25-ish miles with, say, 13,000 feet of elevation. So it ends up being just a massive amount of elevation and a massive amount of distance in bad weather. And you only have 12 hours to complete each loop. And if you miss, you're out.
So for reference, for people who know me and are local to Philadelphia in specific, there's a 24-hour event that I've done for the past 2 years where you run up and down the art museum steps, the Rocky steps for
Right.
24 hours. And, my elevation, depending on if you're looking at Garmin or Strava or whatever, is between 14 and 18,000 feet for 24 hours. So you're saying it's about 13,000 feet of elevation every 12 hours.
Every 12 hours. That's right.
Right. And 5 times.
Yeah. And it's not steps. It tends to be muddy slopes that it's sort of like go up 2 feet, slide back one sort of stuff.
Oh, man.
And honestly, the downs are as hard as the ups because the downs really tear up your quads. And yeah, you end up cramping and never mind the getting lost. It's also an area that's fog is very prevalent. So to make matters even worse, right? Yeah.
And so what were some of the quirky things about the race experience from your point of view before I ask you about how it ended and when it ended for you?
The books are very hidden. Like I, being a navigator, didn't have a lot of trouble getting to where the book was, but then it could still take me 20 minutes to find it. It's inside a beech tree. It's underneath a flat rock. It's right. It could be. It's in the, what did he call it? The Barkley shaped stump. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so yeah, that's the quirkiness of the event is finding the books.
Mm.
And as well as the whole entry process is a secret. You have to define that, and yeah, and you get one support person. Yeah. Oh,
So
and the start. There's no official start time, so it could start any time between midnight and noon. And Laz wakes up and blows a shell, a conch, and that means the race is starting in an hour. So your support crew basically stays up all night listening for the shell while you're trying to sleep. And some years it starts at 1 a.m. and some years it starts at 11 a.m. And so it's really that it adds to the difficulty before you've even started.
sure. And I don't know if this is an every year kind of thing or just the video that I had seen where it stuck out to me. But at the finish, I believe he has one of those buttons from Staples that says
Yeah,
that was easy when you.
that was easy. Yes, he does. Yeah.
So with that being
Yeah.
said, where did your race end, and what was it that ended up kind of getting you in that one?
They say you have to go with a veteran, or you'll never finish. And so I tried to stay with the lead group, and I was with them for the first probably 4 books. And then when we got to book 5, it's like I'm going way too fast. I can't maintain this pace. And so from that point on, I was alone, and I realized I actually had no trouble finding the book spots. But that initial going quickly, I got behind on my food and my water and started cramping. And I tried to recover, but it's like, do you want to eat going down the hill? Well, no, because you need your hands, right? Do you want to eat going up the hill? Well, no, because you can't eat going uphill. You're working too hard. And there's no flat. So I just couldn't keep calories in. And everybody, it's a learning experience. Most people that finish it take 3+ tries. And by most people, I mean the 1% that have finished it. Um, so for me, I got to the fire tower. I was in great shape, but I knew that I needed to eat. So I stopped there for 25 minutes and I ate. I had a burger in my backpack and I left thinking, okay, I've got that under control. And two big climbs later, I'm cramping. I can't, I could go 100 steps and I have to stop. And so the last bit took me 2 hours longer than it should have. But I finished the first loop in 11 hours, but I couldn't keep any food down. And so I stayed in camp as long as I could. And then I went out on loop two and I was just throwing up every time I ate or drank. And I made it one book in about 6 miles and said, I can't, I'm going to destroy myself. And so I turned around and humbly walked back to the yellow gate to be bugled out. Yeah. And then I think I laid in my van for about 12 hours. And then when I got home, I was in bed for another day and a half. I
Wow.
was totally wrecked. Yeah. So,
So is that the kind of experience that makes you say, glad I did it, not for me? Or is there a part of you that thinks, I'll try again?
I would try again. Yeah, you learn, right? You learn what to do differently. Like I needed more liquid calories. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I needed to go slower at the beginning and not worry about finding the books, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I probably ought to find somebody that is about my pace to go with. These are the lessons you learn, and it takes more than one try, but yeah, I'm running out of years. Realistically, yeah, finishing a fun run is probably not even in the cards for me. But I would like to finish 2 loops if I ever even, applied to get back in, which
Sure.
not a certainty. There's
Yeah.
lots of other fun events that
Yeah.
are maybe a little more fun.
So I'm going to read a quote to you, and I don't know who this is from. It's on the longer side, so bear with me, but I'll follow it up with a question. So
Sure.
the quote goes, why are we riding on? If you ask an alpinist why he climbs a mountain, he'll reply, because it's there. As far as I know, no one has ever pointed out what nonsense that is. The alpinist's will isn't prompted by the mountain. It's there even without a mountain. The alpinist's will is not so petty that it needs something as random as the shape's crust in order to exist. Even if the earth were as flat as a billiard ball, there would still be alpinists, the true alpinists. The true alpinist would actually be so ashamed to have his will molded by things of an order as low as mountains. So the only question could rightly be asked of the true alpinist: why do you never climb mountains? So my question, as maybe I'll explain this quote as it stands out to me, is the alpinist or the adventurer or the explorer, they don't climb mountains only because there are mountains. They would climb quote unquote mountains even if the earth were flat. They would find internal mountains. They would do hard things. They would scratch that itch. And so that
Yeah.
that thing is inside of you. And I'm curious when you first recognized that that was there.
Yeah. Driven, right? That's the driven to something, whatever that is. Um, when did I recognize it? I would probably go all the way back to high school.
Mm.
I was There was a March of Dimes walk, and um, I just decided on a sort of a whim, like, oh, I'll do that, and like maybe 2 days before it, kind of thing.
Mm.
And I was wearing had to be blue jeans, I think it was about 15 miles, which is like a massive distance when I think I was probably 14. Um, so but anyway, I'm like, yeah, this sounds it be interesting. And so I entered, raised some money, whatever, and did it. And then I don't know, 2/3 of the way through, I'm kind of not doing well, but I wasn't stopping, right? I was going to make it to the end, and I did. Um, so yeah, I raised money for the March of Dimes, but that drive sort of that's when I joined the cross country team, and I was known as the guy who crossed the finish line and threw up. Because I would get when as soon as I could see it, I would sprint for everything I had to get there, and invariably then I would throw up.
Mm.
So it's definitely the, you know, uh, extreme. Push myself as far as I possibly could, every chance I had.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've had a number of, runners, endurance athletes, et cetera, on the podcast, as well as a lot of people who have no interest in that world. And we talk about other hard things, but these two conversations stand out to me. One is episode 113 of this podcast with Mike Gagliardi. He goes by Gags. He's a local guy to Philadelphia, ultra runner. He's also got a great beard, which I feel like is pretty standard for ultra runners. And then episode 188 with Dean Karnazes, who's
Oh
also,
yeah.
an ultra runner, although he has no beard. And I asked both of them, when things get hard, when you're out there, your legs hurt, your lungs hurt, you're tired, exhausted, delusional, etc. What do you tell yourself? What's the internal dialogue that helps you to keep going, to help you endure? Because a lot of people are listening to this and they're hard, might be going for a 2 mile walk because they haven't pursued exercise and fitness in a while. For someone else, it might be a marathon. For someone else, it might be an adventure race. But what do you tell yourself when things get really hard?
So there's two sort of related things. One, in adventure racing, there's a lot of dropping out, right? You're a team of four, people get hurt, all kinds of things can happen. And so just getting the four of you to the finish line healthy is kind of a big success. But when it's the middle of the night, it's pouring rain on day 3 of a 7-day event, that's not what you want to think. It's not day 3 of a 7-day event. It's it's the end of this bike ride. Or if that's too far, it's the next checkpoint, right? And if that's too far, it's the top of this hill, right? You just don't focus on, I'm going to do this for 4 more days or 30 more miles. If it's 100 more steps, it's that telephone pole or that hilltop, right? So I think that's one aspect of keeping going is reducing your goal and just do that over and over. And eventually you feel better or, things change. The other is um, when I'm in a race and I'm considering it's really bad and I think I should drop out, I is to stop, sit down, eat, drink, and think about, are you really destroyed or are you just mentally not in it? And tomorrow at the awards ceremony or this evening at the awards ceremony, do I want to be sitting there thinking, maybe I didn't give it all? Or do I want to be exhausted sitting there going, I pushed on and got to the end? What feeling do I want to have tomorrow? And that's one of my big motivators is just to, yeah. And a lot of times all it takes is a little break and you can reset your mental, stamina and keep going.
Well, I think a couple things that come to mind. I love the idea of minimizing future regret. That's a lens that I try to look through a lot of life with, as just, if I make this decision now, will I regret it down the road? And I think one of the things that stands out to me the most about regret is it's often regretting giving up on something. It's regretting
Right. Yeah.
stopping something, right?
Yep.
And you have to navigate that and tread with, am I hurting myself? And that
Right.
that can be a hard line to navigate at times.
The
Um,
human body is quite amazing in its resilience and ability to keep going. Even untrained, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but in the beginning of World War II, when they marched the women all over Malaysia for 6 months,
mm,
basically just said, we're walking to a prison camp and it's 400 miles away. And they just did it.
yeah,
They weren't given a choice. And it's, the human body adapts and adjusts. And it's unbelievable what you can do And I think most endurance sports, it's the mental. The mental is really the limiter.
I
So
agree. I agree. And it goes hand in hand with the other thought that I had, which is it comes from Chad Wright, who is also an ultramarathon runner. He was a Navy SEAL. And I believe it's his phrase, which is you can't quit in the chair. Meaning, if you want to quit the race, if you want to drop out, sure, sit down, change your socks, eat some food, but you can't make the decision to quit while you're sitting in the chair. You got to get up, take a few
nice.
steps, and then you can choose to quit. And I think it just plays to the fact that, like, yeah, when you get moving, you realize, like, hey, I might as well just keep going. I might as well
Right.
get to the top of this hill. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, let me ask you this because this is the Project Endure podcast, and the word endure or endurance means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When you hear the word endure, what does that mean to you?
Uh, I would say, it's persevere. Just get through the hard stuff. There
Hmm.
is another side, and it's worth getting to. So
Hmm.
that's endure.
So one of the phrases I've been playing around with quite a bit is everything we want is on the other side of hard. Everything worthwhile is uphill in a certain way. And I'm curious if you see that as a true statement in your own life.
Uh, I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say that there is a lot of reward on the other side of hard.
Hmm.
That's not to say that there aren't some easy things that are rewarding, but you know, I um I don't know how this is if this is related or not, but I was
Yeah.
cycling um across Europe on a road bike touring, and we were going over the Alps, and my friend was let's just take the train up to the top. It's kind of been a long day already, and I'm like, I really want to. It was Davos. We were going to Davos, and I'm like, no, I really want to cycle up, and we sort of had this conversation while we were eating lunch, and it's like, I don't. It's not that I want to look back and say I cycled over the Alps. I mean, I do, but I'm actually enjoying
Mm.
the cycling over the Alps, right? So I don't want to stop because I'm really having fun. Like this is really cool, right? I'm cycling over a mountain range. So yeah, I think there's another perspective too of there's enjoyment going through the hard, right? It's not all terrible.
Yeah. I host an annual event in Philadelphia each year for the past 5 years. This is year number 5. It's a health and wellness event. It's focused on bringing good people together to do hard things, have a good time, make meaningful connections. And last year's theme was "It feels good to do hard things." And I think for a lot of I'll say quote unquote normal population, it's a weird statement to make. But I do think that there's something very rewarding and enjoyable about pushing yourself, about challenging yourself, about overcoming, about enduring. And it takes a certain kind of person to appreciate that. And I'm wondering for you what it's looked like to find those other people to do these hard things with, to have fun with while you do these hard things.
Yeah, adventure racing is rife with those very people. If you think you're doing hard stuff, boy, you look around and there are people doing stuff that, we were on a cross country ski trip and two of the people had skied to the South Pole,
Oh my goodness.
right? And we were skiing just around Sweden,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, so there's always, and this is a theme, there's always harder things and there's always people better than you at whatever you're doing.
Mm.
So the accolades of being on the podium or winning or all that, it's yes, there's an amount of um, competence, in you doing it, and but it's also who else happens to show up that day,
Mhm.
right? And that's out of your control, right? Um, so yeah, as far as the people that like to do hard things, I think, are everywhere. We just have different definitions of what's hard.
Yeah, I like that. And, just to bring it back close to where we started before I ask you the last big question, I think a lot about the squiggly lines and how it relates to life. And I can't help but bring up this fact that so far nobody has proven me wrong on. And I think it's true. But when you look at nature and things out in nature, there are no straight lines. If you think of a tree, a river, even a blade of grass, right? Everything's got a bend, a twist, a curve, etc. And I can't help but think of our lives like that, right? There's no straight line from point A to point B. I want to train for this race. I want to pursue this job. I want to have this relationship. It's never linear, right? There
That's
are
right.
ups and downs and twists and turns. And so I wanted to circle back to that to preface this last question, because there are people all over the world listening to our conversation right now who are going through all different kinds of things. Some are at the end of a relationship, some are at the beginning of an adventure, some are just stuck somewhere in the middle. But regardless, there are people listening who are just having a hard time. They're going through a tough season. They might not know where to go or what to do. And if you had the chance to talk to someone right now, one to one, and just share some encouragement, some guidance as to how to navigate, how to move forward, right? How to take the next right step. What would you say to the people listening who are struggling right now?
Uh, right. It's one moment at a time and enjoy the good ones.
Mm,
It's I don't like to focus on like a comparative analysis. Um, you know, People think they're at the bottom and they're not. You know,
mm,
there's a there's always people that are worse off or further down the ladder of or whatever. There's a modern day philosopher, Tim Urban. He writes a blog called Wait But Why. Amazing guy.
mm,
You should look it up. But he has this staircase of life sort of thing, and he says if you're breaking up and you're in a bad relationship and it's ending or something like that, you're not at the bottom of the stairs.
mm.
Right? The people in the wrong relationship are actually not as far along as you are. so so there's always that perspective of, is it really that bad? I mean, yes, it's bad. You're in your head and it's bad, but you kind of have to think, there's still good in the bad. There's good moments in every day. You walk outside and there's a breeze and you watch the leaves come through, or you're in the forest and you stop and it's a moment of silence. And your whole life could be a disaster in whatever way, but wow, I can just pause here and maybe get a little energy back to face the next challenge. Um, yeah. And people are really what it's all about, right? We all do these events, but I put on events. I'm a race director and I focus on the social. I want people to be able to interact in the middle of the event. So I always have 2-day events with a big dinner in the middle where sort of people get to know each other. And that's really the fun of it. And so yeah, I do truly believe that we're not in this world alone.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm going to summarize for my sake, our conversation in a lot of ways, it's do hard things with good people and pause to appreciate all the great moments along the way.
That is well said.
Well, with all of that being said, Mark, I know you injured your shoulder. We started with that. When we emailed back and forth about recording this, you mentioned depends on when surgery is, and I didn't realize how the timeline of all of this. So I appreciate you recording this. But after you're healed and after you're back and doing your thing, what's next for you if people are curious about the future?
Next for me, I my favorite event is the Dragon's Back. It's a coast to coast stage run across Wales. You
Mm,
start in Conway at Conway Castle, and you finish at Cardiff Castle in the south. You navigate your way down with map and compass and you camp every night with 300 other people. And so there's this social bit, there's amazing food, there's navigation, and there's running, and it's amazing scenery. You go to Wales and you think, oh, it's England, the UK, and it's civilized. And there's wilderness in Wales that's off the hook amazing. So I love the event. This would have been my third time going this year, and I just deferred because of my injury. There's no way. This is 6 months of rehab, and I can't run basically. So, but hopefully I'll be doing that in 2027. And then I don't know. I mean, there's always something, yeah, the World Adventure Racing Championship this year is on Corsica. I won't be there, but next year it's in Croatia. Never been there. That could be fun. So yeah, just wait and see.
Well, I'm sure there are great things ahead, and I know that the rehab is in some ways maybe a bit daunting. I'm sure it's not something you're super excited about, but
No.
I have no doubt that you will climb that mountain and embrace that adventure one day at a time. And I always end off with asking, where can people find more about you, learn more about you? And I'm going to assume that you would point them toward your website, but I'll let you confirm that if that's the case.
Yeah, there's certainly some of my thoughts and accolades and other things, but Tanzi Navigation is my company of where I put on events, and there's an About Me page that has my previous schedule with some race reports and the future events that I'm planning on doing. So, and I'm always up to talk about adventure racing and navigation to anybody that wants to have a conversation. So
Amazing. Well, I will link that in the description to make it easy for everyone to find. And before I let you go, I just want to thank you for this conversation. It's really made my day, and I know it's going to add a lot of value to the people listening.
Great. Well, I'm glad you asked me to chat. So it's been fun.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.